For those of you who don't know me, my background, before starting Marr& Associates, I was at DARPA from 2011 to 2016, where I ran their portfolio of materials and manufacturing programs. Prior to that, I was at Army Research Lab, where I was the branch chief for the Material Applications branch and Composite and Hybrids branch. But I actually did work for a living prior to all that. I worked in industry for 20 years at places like Martin Marietta, that just aged me, and AAI and DuPont. While I was in industry, and I left like late 90s, 2000 to start my government service, we were doing a lot of adoption of new quality programs, and that seemed to keep everybody on their toes. When I came back in industry after leaving DARPA, the amount of changes that were trying to be incorporated onto the manufacturing floor were just astounding. And it occurred to me that there was a real problem in how industries were basically bringing in new technologies and doing that adoption and being able to bring it to the manufacturing floor so it was seamless. And so last year we were at this event and we were talking about how different people were approaching it, and manufacturing harmonization was a term that came up. SME was able to do a survey for that that some of you might have participated in. And what was really interesting is in the survey, half the people of industries don't have a process for adopting new technologies. There's not a formal process. Among small businesses, when they're bringing in a new technology, most of them actually contract out the installation, and half of the training programs don't have a formal training program to bring that on, other than buying the manual and getting an initial startup. And so when you think about all the different technologies that we're trying to bring on board, you can understand the confusion that can occur on the manufacturing floor. So with that, we've kind of assembled a panel today that we're going to be talking about the challenges that you face in adopting new technologies and multiples at the same time, and how they've overcome them. You met Andres. What people I want to talk about is, with Andres, he's an engineer at heart. You have a master's in mechanical engineering and business administration from Octon University. Did I get that? Great. Under his leadership, SGL is actually, in their materials and carbon fiber and composite materials program, they've actually become one of the world leaders in that area. And you've seen that in his presentation before, but it really has been under his leadership that's occurred. I'd like to bring up George Bernich. Did I get that? Bernich? Okay, George, after a 25-year career working in the commercial avionics and defense ordnance industries, George has spent the last 4 years consulting with various manufacturing institutes and universities to develop enabling technologies for industrial IoT and open source controls. He is currently completing the integration of a new type of manufacturing automation cell at the University of New Hampshire's John Olson Advanced Manufacturing Center, and is here to talk about the challenges related to adoption of industrial IoT and automation by small and medium manufacturers. Next, I'd like to bring up Avner Ben-Basset. Avner is the president and CEO of Platane, a leading provider of industrial IoT and AI-based optimization solutions for complex manufacturing environments. Avner has been invited to speak at over 30 major composites and aerospace-related conferences globally in the past 4 years, among which are AirTech, CAMEX, SAMPE, JC World, AeroDef, China Composites Expo, and SME. Welcome. Next up is Jeff Miller. Jeff is the Senior Technical Fellow in Production Engineering at the Boeing Company. He currently leads the Boeing Enterprise Automation Team and has 30 years of experience in leading innovation technology development through production systems implementation. He teaches manufacturing of aerospace composites at the University of Washington as well. and is a certified manufacturing engineer and technologist, exam review courses for SMEs Chapter 39. Jeff has a PhD in mechanical engineering, is a SME certified manufacturing engineer, and a registered professional engineer. Welcome, Jeff. Next up is Tara Thompson. In January 2019, Tara was named a Lockheed Martin Fellow as a subject matter expert in the areas of thermoplastic additive manufacturing, advanced materials and processing, and advanced manufacturing technology and strategy. From 2014 to 2018, she served as the Lockheed Martin Aeronautics Company Manufacturing Technology Contract Research and Development Small Business Innovation Research Manager, where she was responsible for collaborating with Navy Mantech and Air Force Mantech organizations to shape development programs to solve manufacturing challenges while enabling forward-thinking innovation for use on future production systems. Prior to joining the Manufacturing Technology Group, she was a materials and process engineer with the Skunk Works. Welcome, Tara. Okay, so with that, what I'd like to do is we'll give Andreas a little break here, but we'll start with George and give each of the panelists about 5 minutes to talk about their experiences in harmonizing new technologies on the production floor. So, George?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. From my perspective, I kind of focus in a certain area of the harmonization piece of it is mostly getting the actual data from the machines and the PLCs and the tools that are on the floor, at least up until the edge, which is where most of the challenges are for at least small businesses and medium businesses. The amount of different types of equipment, the different configurations that they're in, the different types of manufacturing processes that there are, it's almost impossible to really come up with a very shrink fit or plug and play type tool that can collect this data from the machines and from the things. That's basically the toughest problem. There's a lot of solutions out there once the data's in the edge in at least a temporally consistent fashion, that a whole bunch of players out there that will help analyze your data and do things for you. But if you've got an operation, you can't really be tethered to the cloud. You have to be able to operate independently. If you lose your connection, you got to stay alive. So really the key is how do you get that to happen? And that's a lot of boots on the ground type of work. There's no real easy solution to that. And so what we thought is the way to cure this problem is to come up with not essentially a software product or a product, but a tool, and consider it a tool. And so what we did is we started looking to see what was out there, and we came across something that was actually rather amazing, a small company based out of Orlando that is making such a tool, and they basically do building and process controls for years and years. And what they did is they did two rather critical things, I think, and which is the point I'm going to try to make here on what I think needs to change in order for this to actually happen, is one, they used open standards to implement their tool. They use MT Connect to basically transport information in and out of the tool that they created. They also have OPC UA and Modbus, Profibus, and added a whole bunch of things that are out there. But the main vehicle is this MT Connect piece because of already the movement that's going on with MT Connect and connecting the machine tools. So that was rather significant. And the other reason for that significance is the dependency on the vendor to add unique pieces of equipment is gone, because as long as you have the ability to write an MT Connect adapter, that system will swallow it. So now you don't have to send a request for proposal to try to get a new piece of equipment, like some conveyor belt or something you want to have part of your communication or whatever. So that was really huge. And the other piece is their whole business model really kind of turns the whole thing on its head, because they're not trying to earn the revenue from high costs of software and then forcing compulsory annual maintenance agreements. They flip it around on the head and say, this is $100 per license, which is insane. It's a huge capability for such a small cost. The box that they use is relatively generic. It has a PC, an I/O box, and power. And the guy actually publishes how he built it. So if you don't want to buy it from him for $3,000, which can handle about 3 or 4 machine tools for each one of these boxes, you can build one yourself. So that whole dependency and locking somebody in on that whole proprietary model is essentially getting turned on its head. And where they make their revenue is the services associated with it. Because there's so many of these companies, it's reasonable to assume that a good percentage of them are going to want to help. They don't have the software help, they don't have the expertise, and so forth. So this is really kind of, I think, the change that needs to sweep over the industry if you're going to expect these little 20, 30, and 40 man mom and pop shops to really try to embrace this connectivity and interoperability. So once we found that, we didn't have to develop it, it already existed. We used that as the IoT base, and then we used a grant from the University of New Hampshire, because the way this software works is this guy's doing basically KPP measurements on the floor with a connected either a Bluetooth or a COM port type of a set of calipers and checking KPPs, and as soon as a trend reaches a certain point, which you can set yourself through a graphical user interface, it automatically updates the tool offset in the tool. So I mean, it's an amazing, very low-hanging fruit, very basic benefit. So the small businesses will see that immediately, and that will be an impetus for them to implement this. Little do they know, they got a huge, powerful computing engine that went along with it and don't even understand what the real benefits are. But then that's an evolutionary process. So we took this grant and said, well, if you have this capability to do these controls, can we do a whole cell level controller and run something 24/7? Basically automatic, lights out operation. So we did that. We've been doing that for about the past 9 months, putting a demonstration together at the University of New Hampshire with 3 big machine tools and 2 robots, 300-pound capacity robots. And literally this guy's tool with this, we call it a manufacturing process enterprise. And by the way, since it was funded by a grant, we're releasing it on GitHub as open source for free. So, I mean, you're basically down to $3,000 boxes, $100 software license anywhere else you want this thing to live. And of course, the real expenditure is in the services that you had to hire to connect everything up and put it together. But you're not wrapping a recurring cost around the customer because there are no continuing fees, required to operate the software. So I really think that that's really the only way to really coax a lot of these small businesses into getting at this level. And that's really the precursor to have this globally connected supply chain. I think if you don't do that, you're never going to realize it.
Great. Okay, just to remind everybody, enter your questions online at slido.com. Avner, do you want to take on next?
Sure, thanks Mick, and good morning everyone. Pleasure being here. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Good, should be.
Okay, thanks. Coming in here, kind of putting together some opening comments into topics we can discuss later. For those of you less familiar with our company, we're a software company, and we specialize with AI-based applications, artificial intelligence for manufacturing. A majority of our work is in aerospace, and coming here today, very happy to share our experience, especially as it goes into adopting this technology and dealing with the user base. So there are 2 things I wanted to open with, and we can certainly cover them in greater depth in the conversation. There's a lot of discussion around technology in the past couple of years, and a lot of buzzwords floating around, IoT, AI, Industry 4.0, and associated with them are hopes, concerns, excitement, worries, and all of the above. But really, my first comment to put things into perspective, it's technology. And it's not the first new technology out there. Looking back even decades, we've seen CNC, and we've seen CAD, and we've seen additive, and we've seen robots. And eventually, the technology needs to enable business value. And we can talk some later here of how to evaluate that. But still, there's something special here, especially as it pertains to AI, because inherently AI creates something that perhaps is a bigger leap here. We have software, we have machines that are suddenly making decisions, acting autonomously, making recommendations, if not fully autonomous. And in this context here of harmonization with the user base, this presents new challenges, new opportunities, new dilemmas that were not necessarily there before. And in this dialogue, there's different aspects, and we can certainly talk about them today, but I think one of them is trust. How do we, people, humans, get to trust this new kid on the block, which is effectively of a different nature? And our experience really shows that it's, like any good relationship, you don't really command trust, you need to earn it. And gaining trust, it takes time. And what needs to happen? First of all, this new technology needs to give value. Value to the organization, value to the user that's using it. And over time, it needs to make good decisions that are making this person's life easier, their day-to-day job better, that are enabling higher levels of productivity or quality or whatever the business needs. And we can also talk later about this thing not making mistakes or glaring mistakes, because that really throws the relationship back a few months and regain that trust. So in the context of deploying these new technologies, there's a big question for us today to handle in harmonization is, how do users get to trust and adopt this technology? In addition to that, in the wider business, there's a question of the value proposition, and the two are related. I don't think a new technology will be adopted without making business impact, but I also think the new adoption has to do with the users that will eventually handle it on a day-to-day basis. And here we see different companies taking different tracks and different methods. A lot of them look to evaluate this with some sort of a pilot, and then we see often that they're stuck. Our partners at McKinsey often call it the pilot purgatory. You go into a pilot, you're all excited, the pilot happens, and then really nothing happens after that. One aspect of that is the business impact. People go into pilots, poorly defining what they're expecting to see, sometimes not even defining the business problem that they're trying to solve. And part of that is also the users in the pilot, what they expect to see, and will they give their sign-off that this is good for the organization. So as early as the pilot stage, our recommendation is really to bring the users in, get their opinion. They've been doing their job well for decades in many cases. So even, and perhaps this is my parting comment, even when we're talking about AI and all the excitement and buzz around it, don't expect the users just to go away. They're here to stay. And this team that is now being formed, the man-machine team, actually we see in our experience exceeding the capabilities of any one of them alone. So we're really talking about team building here. And that's an exercise that is actually very challenging, but also very, very exciting. So we can certainly address that as well today.
Fantastic.
Excuse me.
Wow, I woke everybody up. Jeff, you're next.
All right, well, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is really an inspiring location to have this discussion. When I have the opportunity to walk through the exhibit halls or sit in on a technical session, what goes through my mind when I see an interesting technology is how do we transition that into production? So I think that the survey asked a number of good questions regarding this challenge, and I'll talk through a few of the ways that we address that at Boeing. So with the integration of new technology, we have tremendous opportunities to improve our safety, our quality, our productivity, whether it be through hardware, equipment solutions, or accompanying software solutions, or some combination of both is mostly what we see in our larger scale production. So one of the areas that we do to help reduce our integration risk of this technology is to use a number of standardized processes. For example, we've used the technology readiness level process for a number of years, originally developed by NASA in the 70s, I think published in the 80s. More recently, we've adopted the manufacturing readiness level assessment criteria. It's been mandatory with the DoD since about 2011. On the commercial side, we've applied that at a much more rigorous approach to go through and obtain, by following the threads and criteria, a comprehensive production readiness assessment following that process. That helps significantly reduce the transition of our technology into production. We also find working very closely with our equipment and software providers, many are here today, which is great, that we can work together to also significantly reduce the risk of this integration into production. This becomes very critical, especially on our complex solution, which involve interfacing to legacy systems, new technologies, programming, post-processing, simulation. So to work very closely as a partner with our suppliers is another way that we reduce our risks. In some cases, we're fortunate to have test beds where we can verify changes to equipment or software offline to mitigate risks without disruption to production, but in not all cases. Factory integration is another area we pay a lot of attention. We need to integrate in many cases with existing systems, whether they be material handling or clean room compatibility or tooling integration. So to do this, we often build accurate 3D models and comprehensive layouts to ensure that our solutions will work within our factories, as well as to do a thorough assessment of both the material and people flows through those areas. Now, the survey touched quite a bit on training. Training of operators, our maintenance personnel, and other supporting functions, whether it be in our quality group or our programming organizations, is essential to safe operation of our training, and we continuously reinforce safety throughout our training programs. We find that the hands-on training that our suppliers provide to our operators and other folks to be highly effective. And sometimes we will have our suppliers even stay on site after installation and commissioning to continue to reinforce the safe operation of the equipment, competent operation of the equipment, and to also help us through initial builds of products that we may not have produced before. We also find that to be exceptionally valuable. Now, Industry 4.0, or the fourth industrial revolution, gives us the power of the digital twin. This gives us the ability to model both the product and production systems simultaneously, such that we can conduct trades, we can look at options, we can look at performance characteristics of these systems prior to committing to them in production. With that, we also leverage virtual commissioning, which gives us the ability to do high fidelity performance assessments of the production assets. Now, along with this, big data or data analytics is another powerful tool. It may be as simple as creating charts, graphs, or other analysis using data from the machines or sensors on the machines to help perform root cause and corrective action or calculate overall equipment effectiveness, to more advanced methods, including predictive health monitoring. This is an exciting area of research with respect to artificial intelligence and deep learning and rule-based methods. So with our goal to ensure a safe and highly productive factory that produces no defects, these are just a few of the approaches to harmonize new technology into production. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Tara, would you like to comment?
So, as Mick mentioned in my bio, over the last 5 years, I've been working with our manufacturing technology organization at Lockheed Martin Aeronautics. And albeit I have a very biased opinion, it's full of rock stars. And the reason why they're rock stars is that through our leadership and the engineers, from the senior engineers all the way down to the entry-level engineers, they've fostered an environment that really allows for us to work with our internal customers. So the production floor manager, the supply chain manager, to create the opportunities to transition technology successfully. Now, when we add the whole construct of Industry 4.0, that's added a ton of stakeholders we need to reach out to. So the one thing I want all of you to realize is that although you're going to see lots of cool dashboards and cool things software and technology can bring you, this is all based on change management and a cultural shift in how we're going to do business going forward. From justifying the investment, for example, last week I was in a meeting with a chief architect in our IT group. He made the comment to me, you guys are buying all these edge devices and you want to get an IoT platform and a data lake. I feel like you have a build it and they will come mentality with all this. And the reason why he thought that is because all he is seeing is the cost that we're sending to him to set this up for us. No one had taken the time to really go through all of the use cases that we've already identified and said, yes, we're investing foundationally. And yes, that investment in and of itself is not going to bring us ROI. You are enabling us to pull data from our machines and put it into a data lake where those analyses can then take place. And so you really have to put yourself in your stakeholders' shoes and understand, what are they going to push back on you when you propose a new technology, when you propose this nebulous AI or machine learning aspect? Another critical stakeholder some people forget about is the operator on the floor. We have several, we're automating our factory in Fort Worth. We are constantly in contact with our labor union and the shop floor personnel to help explain to them, we're not replacing your job. Yes, we're putting a robot on the floor. We're not replacing your job. We're going to upskill you. And that's where we also work with our training groups and make sure that we can take that level 1 operator and give them the skill set that they can now monitor the automation cells. So again, it's a cultural change that all of us are going to have to address. It's not like just getting a new gauge and inserting it on the floor and taking the old ones out anymore. It's a lot more complicated. And again, best advice, put yourself in your stakeholders' shoes and communicate with them constantly. Because if you don't, towards the end of your integration, someone's going to come out and go, I don't know about this. You guys did not hit these requirements, and therefore I'm stopping you from integrating. Whether it's a facilities manager or supply chain manager, new safety manager that just came on board, you need to make sure you have all your stakeholders covered from day one. Thank you.
Fantastic. Andres, you gave a presentation, but do you have any other further comments you'd like to add?
Yeah, I like Tara's remarks very much, because I believe it's not about adding another gadget, a fancy thing. It's really about, when I look at our different production plants, each plant is different and has a different heritage. Some are very modern, discrete manufacturing, others are process manufacturing, so very different type of production systems in place, different culture. And when you want to implement new technologies, it's really difficult, and it involves a lot of change management. I think that's really the key, to have that in the back of your mind and not just roll out, bulldozer something new, a new fancy buzzword into the system. This will fail at the end of the day, and that's, I think it's really important to take along, to educate the people involved on the advantages of what we are doing. Without doing so, this will fail. I think this is really the most critical step, and that is often forgotten.
Yeah.
Because senior management very often jumps on the new technology, and that's something we have to bear in mind.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a number of questions coming in. For anybody who came late, if you go to slido.com, you can enter questions, and I'll pick them up here and ask them if we have time. To get started, let's see. What do you believe are the minimum requirements for a company to begin the journey to production harmonization? And that's given out to everybody. Anybody want to jump in on that one?
Sure. I'm not sure where the question came from, and typically it comes from a technical point of view. Is my factory ready from a technology? Do I have cabling and internet in my factory? But I think that that direction can often be misleading. I think the readiness factor comes from the DNA of the organization and the resulting change management. Tara and Andres mentioned as well. Are we ready for that kind of technology? And we see a lot of organizations out there that are ready. They're ready in the sense that they have been doing it for decades. And every year or every decade, they've been out there adopting the latest and greatest. But I think the number one question is if you're ready or not, have you really found a problem that is worth solving? And to address his comment, we go to customers, and in many cases we ask, so, hi, we're Platane, and how can we help? And the guy there says, well, I'm not really sure, but management told me to do something with this AI thing. And okay, well, hang on. Then to address the question, then you are not ready. And like with anything, what's the business pain? What's the problem statement? Are you trying to improve your throughput, your yield on materials, your quality, whatever it is? And then, okay, let's see if this technology or another is suitable to address it. So when I discuss readiness of these new technologies, it's hardly ever the technical gaps. These gaps are more easily addressed. These come more from the business case, which eventually, if you don't solve, it's not going to happen. But also from the DNA of the organization, how ready it is to accept this new evolution. And while everyone is different, what's the plan? Do you have a plan in place for this change management? And who are you talking to? And for the earlier comments as well.
Does anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, I could comment on that a little. I think that there's a lot of reasons why people would want to move into the change management piece, but most of it, I think, is a lot of times they're not really aware of things that could be improved and changed, but they haven't. There's things that are happening on the line, and then there's, for example, the parts go through metrology later at some point in time, and they see trends and things. So you have a bunch of IT people and quality people seeing things that are happening, but how do you affect it right on the ground when the parts are being made? And it's making that gap. They don't realize that there are ways to solve this problem and what's available. And a lot of times I get the questions of like, well, we didn't even realize that you could do something that basic and that simple. And I think that the way to get it is you got to find low-hanging fruit will motivate people to try to make that change. And then they get the buy-in from the cultural aspect of it. It has to, I don't think you could come in with a big, grandiose, change plan. I mean, you can if senior management is ready for that. But a lot of times it's usually low-hanging fruit, things that'll provide value very quickly. While you're doing that, they wind up learning what other capabilities are out there and tend to grow in that direction.
Great. Okay, let's go take the next question. When considering the adoption of new manufacturing technologies such as AI, IoT, how does one get started? It's almost related to the last question. What are the steps that need to be taken? What do you recommend?
So perhaps to extend that, the first thing to do is, what are you trying to do? Ask yourselves. And look for something that on the one hand is low-hanging fruit, but on the other hand has business impact. This is not an exercise of coolness. We leave that for the academics. They explore new frontiers and they do amazing stuff. And yes, I think it's cool. But eventually someone, a CFO or a general manager, have to sign off on this. And they'll ask the usual questions. It's the same questions they'll ask with any investment. I put X, what am I getting? Whether it's a short-term return or a long-term return, that question is inevitable. So it's a question of find a good problem to address, but hopefully you're doing that anyway as your organization evolves. And then if this is a problem that can be addressed with a new technology, all the better. Maybe an older one solves it just as well. And that puts you on the right path. And so if people ask me where to start, figure out your problems and then find the solutions and not the other way around. And the rest just works as usual. If you've been around long enough, your organization adopted CAD 30, 40 years ago. In this respect, nothing much has changed.
Does anybody else have any comments?
Yeah, essentially, we have a manufacturing systems group now really to address the root of this. It's the convergence of our operational technologies, whether it be our CMMs or auto drills, Bluetooth torque wrench, those operational technologies with the IT side, and bringing that information across, not manually delivering it to a quality person to assess it. It's all about providing those stakeholders the ease of finding the information And so business case is huge, but the low-hanging fruit, like you said, finding those easy things. If you have Bluetooth-enabled torque wrenches, you have something right there that you can start looking at to basically use the data and just deliver it in that fashion, instead of having someone coming in and do a dummy inspection to make sure that it was torqued at the right pounds. There's a lot of things that all of us already have on our floor that we're just not putting together yet that we can embrace from the IoT perspective. So really, just look for what you already have on your floor. Like I said, laser scanners, any of that. They all have this data that can be digitized and then used downstream. So that would be the first place I would ask you to look before you decide to go buy some whiz-bang multi-million-dollar piece of equipment. You have things in-house already that you can leverage to build those low-hanging business cases to convince the operators and the management that we should keep going with this. There's benefit to it.
Great point. Anybody else before we move on to next? Okay, the next one is new technology costs money to implement. So how do small and medium businesses realize the ROI of this investment long term? That almost sounds like a grenade for you to jump on, George.
Actually, that's not my question. But yeah, no, the low-hanging fruit piece again is part of it. But like I said, it's usually like OEE, for example, utilization is probably one of the most common things, no matter whether you're into paper production or whether metal parts production. So I think that you can utilize at least that as a basic low-hanging fruit. That's pretty common to most people, and it's useful. There is a business case for it, right? And then it just comes down to now, how do you go about implementing it? There's a lot of products out there. You can buy pretty highfalutin MES systems that can do a lot of great things for you. Like the biggest challenge is, how do you really trust that ROI that you think you've calculated? Because that's really kind of a leap of faith, if you will. And I've seen companies being presented ROIs for their operations. They clearly state they're going to save some money, yet they still won't buy the stuff. Mm-hmm. It's an incredible, it's hard to understand why, when someone presents a financial ROI, why you would still have a hesitancy to buy something. There's more to it than that. It can't be just that simple math calculation of dollars. There's some other, be it cultural or be it something that's preventing companies from making an investment. As far as the high cost, well, like I said, I think the business models need to change. I've pretty much made that case, but that really comes down to whether, you can sustain a business on a service-based type of approach as opposed to a licensing approach.
Yeah. Does anybody else have? I picked you because of the
No, it's all good.
All good. Maybe I'll add to that. I think it's a cultural thing, which comes on top of the dollars. And that's, looking at it from a composites company perspective, is having talked about the different technologies here, and when you see it's for in the automotive supply chain, it's easy for suppliers to adopt technologies that are common. And when you are used to pressing, it's easy, you take a thermoplastic material and press it, it's easy. But when it comes to something like fiber placement, it's something out of their zone of comfort, and as soon, even if the technology may be better, they won't adopt it because it's out of their comfort zone. And maybe that's the same thing for all these IT systems as well. As soon as it's out of their comfort zone, it gets culturally difficult. And I think that's, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, next comment comes in. We got off the anonymous people. Doug, can you comment on the challenges of transitioning and harmonizing advanced manufacturing processes and equipment into a classified environment? So I'm going to start out and look towards you, Jeff, and then Tara.
Well, it's going to be similar from the technological point of doing it in non-classified. However, you will have the constraints of the security provisions on top of that. Still have to go through the same steps of going through and looking at the different elements that are going to be affected by implementation of that technology. You may still have to program the machines. You may still have to gather data from the machines or the solutions that you implement. You're just going to have to do it in a more restrictive environment and deal with the security classifications.
Isolated and hardwired.
I was going to say, it might be somewhat easier.
Yeah.
Because you're offline. Tara, did you have?
Yeah, well, to add to that, one thing that we've tried to make sure that we've done, and again, we've missed it from here and there, is to bring in our security guys to understand what the equipment does, what kind of, can we use Bluetooth? No, okay, well, what about this? If you start at the beginning, before you even design your flow, et cetera, it will make your life a whole lot easier, because then, again, if you have equipment on order and then the security guy finds out, oh, well, it has this capability, you've got to get them to take that out, because we don't even want it available for someone to flip a switch and turn it on. It can cause havoc into your implementation schedule and then back up your production schedule. So involve the correct security personnel and cybersecurity folks at the start would be my advice.
Perhaps, Mick, to Tara's point, the devil's in the details. Okay, classified is a very wide blanket, and information security is a very big word. And for every type of equipment, hardware, software, process, the answer is in the details. Hence, bringing in the experts early on. And even our own experience working with various levels of classified organizations or data. Eventually, the information security team will set a bar that you, as the manufacturing or engineering operations, need to meet, and then your vendor will need to meet that. Here, perhaps, Doug, this is not just about defense classification. We see a lot of business, commercial organizations that are very sensitive about their data and their proprietary processes. So these principles will certainly apply there, really at the same level.
Great. Question from Mark. Culture change and change management have been mentioned several times. What does that look like? How do you go about actually managing culture change?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I drank the Kool-Aid of change management and culture management and change after I heard Rick Maurer give a presentation one time. He has a book, and he's not paying me. He has no clue I'm saying his name. So don't tell him either. He'll ask me for a check. That basically, is it 60% of change initiatives, equipment change in production environment fail because you've missed one of the critical things. One, identifying your stakeholders and understanding what their pain points are, putting yourself in their shoes to get them on board. If the workforce and the management doesn't understand why a change is even needed, again, what business issue are you trying to address and do it the right way, they're never going to buy in. And then those people are going to be the naysayers in the meetings. They may not raise their hand, they may kind of nod in the meeting, but as soon as they walk out that door, they're going to say, man, this is the dumbest thing we've ever done. Why are we wasting this money? And I know most of us have been in meetings like that, and so you know what I'm talking about. You have to get those folks engaged. The next step is then you get started. Until you get those people on board, you're going to mess up if you go ahead and plow through it. Like you guys were saying, a lot of times new initiatives, and we all kind of have the shooks, oh, this is the latest initiative, be it from HR or IT or security, whoever, and we all kind of joke about it. Well, the thing is that they never got everybody's buy-in yet. So there's questions, there's resistance. So after you get everybody's buy-in that you need, then you get started. You keep communicating the entire time that you're developing the technology, implementing the technology, and then when you actually start rolling it out, the group, like for example, Mantech, they don't walk away. It's not like getting a forklift out of a crate and then letting someone drive off with it. Everything we do is much more complicated. There's processes that have to be written in the software, in training manuals, electronic work instructions, and then there's optimization after that. So you have to continue with that change. You can't just throw it over the fence. And then you have to assess it. Sometimes there's a point where it's like, we need to just stop this. Or there's times where you just have to keep people engaged and make sure that they're willing to carry on the activity. And with all of this, it's not going to be a one and done. If we just hook up some equipment and put some data somewhere where an analyst can do something, we're wasting our time and money and not getting what we can. We're really going to be surpassed in the global economy if that's the attitude we take. We really have to embrace the change. So, Mark, if you want to talk to me after the panel, I'll give you some names of some books that I've read. They are all, in my opinion, honestly, it's all common sense. But damn it, we're humans, and we're like, oh yeah, we got this, we can just do it, and then we forget. And then we stop doing it, and we wonder why it doesn't work. Having a process for common sense seems ridiculous, but we really need to do it, and that's the whole change management paradigm.
Get that procedure written now.
Yeah, common sense needs to be documented.
Is there any other comments? Okay, I'm going to go a little bit out of order because I like this next question. If a company invests in the wrong manufacturing 4.0 technology, doesn't meet the requirements, it's difficult to implement, whatever, at what point do you admit failure and start over?
I'll take it.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, first of all, how do you know that you've failed?
Yeah.
Okay? And at what point do you recognize that? Go back. What have you been trying to achieve? And per our collective comments earlier, there must be some measured factor here. Okay, some KPI. I was trying to increase my throughput. I was trying to improve my first-time quality. I was trying to, whatever the KPI may be. In the context of this discussion, I would throw in another KPI in terms of the user adoption and their ability to use the system. But yeah, I mean, some efforts inevitably will fail. And then you will know how it happened and when it happened, and different organizations do a better job debriefing these failures and learning from them. But what do? Yeah, you may have to start over, or you may have to just fine tune. But at the end of the day, there's an element here of a journey. And our recommendation, to the world, to our clients, is not to go all out, because then the failure could be very substantial. And the money is less the issue. I think it's the loss of trust of the organization and these kind of technologies, and that sets back the organization a lot. There's an element of risk averseness, I think, in aerospace, or with all of us here. And often people make a decision not to do anything. But doing nothing is also a decision that is made, whether you're aware of that or not. So then you've done nothing, and then how do you know that you've failed? Right? So there's failure in doing nothing as well. And we see out there, and a survey we even did last year with SME about technology adoption, there's a very clear correlation between the market leaders in their respective segments and their tendency to be out there and try. And when you try, ultimately, sometimes you will fail. And how do you know you failed? Well, what have you been trying to do? And then fix it or do it again. The research broadly shows, specifically if we're looking at these recent technologies, Industry 4.0, et cetera, and different companies have different meanings for that. But research published broadly by companies like Deloitte and McKinsey and otherwise show that early adoption of this technology is actually accelerating business growth, while secondary, the followers, actually have it harder. So there is an element here of trial. There is an element here of groundbreaking technologies. But when you jump in, you better know what you're looking for. Otherwise, you'll get lost very quickly.
I'd like to add something to that. It's actually an extremely good question, because the real answer to that is you don't want to be in that position to begin with. And unfortunately, that's it. I mean, if you really did fail, you don't know if you did because there's probably capability in there that you can use, but you just don't know it. But if it really is an abject failure, you have no choice. You got to start again. The point is not to get into that position. And one of the reasons we went down the path that we went was the small business guy has to be de-risked almost to the point where even if he did have to start over, the investment is so minimal that it's really not going to knock him off kilt. So one of the things that we did when we laid out this automation cell in order to do this demonstration is we realized that when you go and Google automation, usually you'll see a machine with a robot in front of it with a fence around it, or you'll see a robot in the middle with a bunch of machines around it and a fence around it. So you're reliant on high volume contracts in order to keep the utilization on that equipment to maximum potential, right? Well, the way that we laid it out is we took advantage of the fact that the equipment manufacturers are trying to sell multi-pallet changers and add-on options. And by doing that, they've created a different access point into the workspace of the machine. So we took advantage of that and said, oh, great. So we'll get this Mori machine, this Haas machine, and this Mazak machine that all have bolt-on options, but we didn't buy the options. We just used the access point. So we put a rail system and an ABB robot and basically tend through that port. So the idea here is the fence is on the back side of the machine. Mm-hmm. So the small business guy, if he's not getting high volume contracts, he can literally walk up to that machine, open a door, work 2 or 3 prototypes, 20 prototypes, whatever he feels like, and walks away, never crosses a fence, and never deals with a robot or any automation issue. Which means he can put that machine under full utilization without any high volume automation contracts. But then if he does happen to get something where there's 2,000, 5,000, lots of pieces of the same thing, he now has the option of using the tender robot on the same machine. So that little step de-risked it a lot because now the small business guy is going to be more likely to say, yeah, I think I can do that because I know if you guys screw up and you don't have automation contracts for me, I can still run my normal business through these machines. Mm-hmm. It's little things like that and keeping the cost low and so forth. And I think if you de-risk it to the point, you'll have a lot less reluctance in jumping into that automation bandwagon and the IoT bandwagon.
Excellent. So that actually kind of leads into the next question. I'm going to combine 2 of these. Given how you talk about de-risking for small businesses and given how risk-averse the aerospace companies can be, and with all these new technologies coming out, Andres, why don't we start with you? How do you balance the business goals that you have with against the innovation acceleration?
How do we balance? I didn't.
So how do you balance your business goals against innovation acceleration, considering the risk?
Oh, that's a tough question. It's well, it's quite a challenge because of course you want to be innovative, you want to be at the forefront of technology, but it's from our perspective internally, it is it's always a question: is it going to be adopted throughout the organization? That's something we look at, or is it just that's a very important criterion. And the other is when we look to the outside, how do we deal with new technologies? It is, of course, is there a business case behind it? So these are the 2 dimensions there. Internally, I think it's on the outside. I tend to say it's easier because you can come up with put some dollars on it. But internally, it is. It's more difficult, and I have to admit I don't have a straightforward answer to that. Mm-hmm. It's
so when you guys were going, you obviously made a big commitment when you went to doing automotive composites. Was that just a leap of faith that you guys went through, or what was the process by you made that decision?
Well, the process for that, for such things is of course we have a very thorough product development process, like Jeffrey mentioned also the TRL or MRL processes. We have something which comes from the automotive industry. We have that in place. We go through the different process phases and all of this. There, of course, are evaluations upfront, so you don't run into issues there. That's clearly defined. When we do try to change the manufacturing, the operations setup, and the mentality there, what we did is we implemented a joint company-wide operations management system, really to prepare the ground for future initiatives. And we have in all the different sites numerous operation excellence managers who work together and exchange such ideas and work together in such projects. I think that is a driver there internally. Yeah, so that's how we tackle that.
A similar process with Boeing?
Sure. I think a lot depends on how much time you have. If you want to take on a new technology risk or opportunity, how far can you take it before you have to revert to your plan B or next best option? Of course, you're applying good risk mitigation processes and looking at maturity levels, readiness levels. But at some point, if the technology is not going to meet the time frame that you need for new product introduction or supporting a production system, we need to be able to move down a different off-ramp or go to a different solution. So much for us is how much time do we have. We've done this on a number of technologies. If they're not going to come home in time, we need to move to an alternate.
Okay, great. We're going to be closing up here. We're running a little out of time, and I'm not sure I'm going to get through all the questions. But let's go ahead and take this next one. Again, it's how do facilities like SGL's FPC enable harmonization implementation to occur without biasing decisions, for equipment or manufacturers? I guess how are you looking at the whole space before you commit?
We are we don't, because the partners, the machinery and equipment suppliers are partners in the fiber placement center. We have no interest at all at any preferring any of the suppliers there. Our benefit at the end of the day is to supply the materials to any solution that is the appropriate solution. So we want, together with Fraunhofer, to come up with a path forward for the customer partner that allows for a working solution at the end of the day. And so we don't care about which machinery and equipment is being used. It's really about is the product going to work, and that's what it's about. So it's much more than just comparing two pieces of equipment here. It's really, as I try to point out this morning, it's when you look at the different solutions, how do you what does the part look like at the end of the day? Is that a metal part, or is that a hybrid composite part? It's really the solution must work at the end of the day, and that's what it's about. So again, we don't have any preference there. If we have the doohickey solution, but it won't work, doesn't make sense. So it's really, we want to together with the customer that the customer is successful and whatever the
Whatever it
machinery
takes.
and equipment is.
So I'm going to open that up a little bit. I know it was addressed specifically to SGL, but all of your companies have preferred suppliers. How do you bring in new innovation? Does your procurement agency force you into using those preferred suppliers, or is there ability to go outside that?
I'll take that one. So, yes, we all have preferred suppliers, but especially in the IoT range, there are so many new companies coming up that, for an example, last year we sent out an RFI about IoT platforms, got 15 responses, and then we started getting calls from Amazon, was it AWS Greengrass? They have a solution now, and that got everybody's attention. They're like, let's do another one. 10 new companies were added to that list. So yes, we have SAP files, and then we have the Siemens people that really love Siemens, but one thing that we have found is that we call it INAR, Independent Non-Advocate Review of these types of technologies. So we have a bake-off. What does this one do based against our requirements? And then we have people who have not been the ones assessing those technologies, but know enough that they can make a valid assessment of it to come in. That way, there's no internal bias of like, oh, well, I work with Doug, and I've worked with him for years, and he's a great guy, I know his family. Their product meets all of our requirements. Well, that might be very true, but they're looking at nuances at that point if everybody's on equal footing. So that's the process that we use today.
Okay. I think we're almost out of time. Well, we are out of time. I just want to give the opportunity for everybody to make a last comment if you like. Andres?
Yeah, as I think all said, the most important thing is really involve the people and prepare for the change. Otherwise, you will not insert new technologies within your corporation. Don't be people agnostic. You may be technology agnostic, but not. You have to involve the people there. Otherwise, you will fail.
Thanks. George?
Yeah, I just think that it's extremely important that we get that small business-based backbone connected.
Yeah, when we're talking about change management, and I 100% agree with the need to get everyone in early, for sure, but implied here that there is change. So there's a wave of new technology. It needs to be evaluated and applied. It drives business value, and that's a very good starting point from our experience.
Yep. We think it's very important to engage all of our stakeholders as early as possible and follow a systematic and disciplined process towards introducing new technology into our production systems.
Tara?
And I'd like you guys to know that this is not easy. If it was, we wouldn't be having a panel on this. We wouldn't have done a survey. So don't get discouraged. It's not going to be 0 to 60. Find those little victories, the low-hanging fruit, the business cases that are enough to help gain some support within your organization. And that'll be the foundational point that you guys can really jump off of and go as far as you want. You don't have to hook up every system you have in your factory. That's not necessary. So do it where it makes sense.
Fantastic. So with that, I'd like to, my final comment is thank you. This was a great panel. I want to apologize that we didn't get through all the questions. Are you guys going to be around the exhibit area today?
Yep.
So pigeonhole them, get your question asked. With that, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.